Chapter 9. Saturday morning, Nick, Dylan Leahy, and about 12 of Callahan's most troubled teens, mostly Chase's friends, spent hours scrubbing, painting, and hanging posters donated from the local library and Phil's music stop. In celebration of their accomplishments, the teens did some form of karaoke. Afterward, over pizzas and sodas, compliments of Nick. Afterward, there was a toast made by Chase and a few others, thanking Nick for starting the Callahan Youth Center. Nick stepped out into the lobby, giving Chase and his friends time to hang out by themselves in the room they had designated as a gym, because of its spacious size and rectangular shape. For the most part, the teens seemed happy, laughing and goofing off. Nick hoped moments like this would bring him and Chase closer. Experience taught him that the minute Chase suspected some kind of friendship was forming between them, he would all but head for the hills. Nick only hoped things would be different this time.
"Hey, Dad."
Chase came up, with Ripa's arm draped over his shoulder. Her chin-length black hair bounced with every step she took before she stopped with a dead halt right in front of Nick and smiled up at him. There she stood, clad in a black tank top, accessorized by suspenders. Both straps hung past the waistband of her gray lowriders, which were rolled high enough to show off her black combat boots. But that was nothing compared to her black eyeshadow, matching lipstick, and two small hooped earrings, one pierced through her upper lip and the other just above her left eyebrow.
"If that's all you needed us for, we're going to head out,"
Chase said, while Ripa continued to bob her head, making some popping sound with her mouth. Pushing aside the uncomfortable feeling that was building within him, Nick turned to Chase.
"Where are you off to?" "We're just going to hang out,"
Chase said, shrugging his shoulders.
"Yeah, sure. We're all done here. Listen, I really appreciate all your help today."
"It's cool, Dad." Chase grinned.
"Jeremy rocks."
Someone yelled before the small mob headed out the door. Nick walked back into the gym. Only moments before, there was talking, laughter, and music. Now there were just empty soda bottles, paper cups, and pizza boxes scattered on the floor.
"What a mess,"
Nick said to himself.
"Need some help?"
Dylan Leahy asked. Thinking Dylan had left with the others, Nick turned around and saw him standing there with paint splotches covering his t-shirt and jeans, looking as if he still wanted more to do.
"Yeah, I could use a hand,"
Nick said with new hope. The two set to work, exchanging thoughts about the day while picking up one piece of trash after another. Once they were finished, Nick packed the trash bag tight and secured it with a plastic tie.
"Sheriff, I think it's pretty cool what you're trying to do for us kids and all. My mother told me to ask you if you had enough volunteers to help run things." "Is your mom volunteering?" "Yeah. Plus my dad kind of thought it would be a good way for her to keep an eye on me."
Dylan laughed.
"If you don't mind, neither do I. With everything we got done today, we should be ready to open on Monday at 3. Tell your mother to give me a call if she has any questions." "I'll tell her." "What time do you and your family usually sit down for dinner?" "About right now. Come on, I'll give you a lift,"
Nick said, pitching the bag of trash into the dumpster as he and Dylan headed for Nick's car. Callahan's curfew for teens was 11:30 p.m. on Saturday and an hour earlier on school nights. Technically, Friday was a school day and Sunday was a school night, which only left Saturdays for teens to hang out with their friends, as they usually put it. With everything wrapped up at the center and no one waiting for him at home, Nick went back to his office. There was always some administration work for him to do. But after a while, Nick wasn't up for shuffling through any more papers this evening. What he wanted was more of a social life. Not as social as what Chase had. He just wanted someone to share his downtime. For him, that person was Michelin. Nick looked at the clock. It was a little after 7. Emergency dispatch hadn't called. That was a good sign. Maybe he could enjoy having a couple of hours to himself. Otherwise, there was nothing to keep him from feeling as if life was passing him by. After turning off the lights and locking up, Nick decided that a drive would do him some good. Callahan was becoming a ghost town. The hub for the theater and clubs was usually packed. But tonight, there was only a handful of people here and there. Even the bars and restaurants had closed early. If this was how things were now, he could only imagine what would happen after Brett Auger implemented his blockade on Callahan's businesses. Nick felt the knot in his stomach pull tighter as he continued his drive. Before he knew it, he found himself at the Grable Motel. Nick pulled into the parking lot and stopped. The light in Michelin's motel room was off. Had she stepped out for the moment, or did she leave Callahan? He had no way of knowing for sure. Her car wasn't there. After what seemed like half an hour, Nick figured it was a good time to call it a night before someone mistook him for being on a stakeout. He was about to leave when a dark-colored car pulled into the lot. The driver looked like Brett Auger, and the woman sitting in the passenger seat looked like Michelin. Nick watched the car and the two people inside. From what he could tell, they seemed comfortable in each other's presence, unlike the tension and dislike he sensed from them earlier. Having seen enough, he pulled out of the parking lot and headed home. That evening, Nick sat on the porch step, feeling sorry for himself. Apparently, Callahan didn't need him. His family didn't need him. And Michelin seemed better off without him. Nick picked up a rock and pitched it across the yard. He was too restless to go inside. There was nothing in there waiting for him. No wife, no children, nothing. Knowing he couldn't sit out there all night, Nick got up and stormed into the house, slamming the screen door shut. He kicked off his shoes, went into the kitchen, and pulled the refrigerator door open. There he stood, peering down into the empty box. He felt like a terrible dad. No wonder his kids were always trying to get away from him. It was probably the same reason Susan left. The phone rang. Nick went over and grabbed up the receiver.
Hello,
Nick demanded. Hello, Sheriff, came the soft, sweet voice on the other end of the line.
Michelin.
A smile tugged at Nick's lips. I was wondering if you'd like some company. I won't stay long.
Where are you?
I just pulled up. Nick stepped over to the door. There sat her Lexus parked in the front of the house. The line broke as she got out. Hi, she said, walking up into his yard. It was then that Nick remembered seeing her earlier with Brett. The last thing he expected was to see her at his door.
Hi,
Nick said, trying to make sense of what was going on.
Come in,
he said, moving aside, letting her in. Michelin's perfume captured him once again, pulling him in closer, but he stepped away instead. I'm not interrupting anything, am I? She asked, looking around. Nick assumed she was looking for Allie and Chase.
The kids aren't here. They had other plans. So, to what do I owe the pleasure?
I was in the neighborhood, and I thought I'd stop by to see how things went today with the youth center.
I had a lot of help, mostly Chase's friends, but we got a lot of work done.
Do you still think you'll be ready to open on Monday?
I think so.
That's really great. She smiled warmly up at him. You care so much about this town. It's so rare to find these days.
I do what I can. Listen, I really hate to bring this up, but I'm kind of curious about something. Do you mind having a seat?
What's going on? Michelin asked, crossing the room and sitting down on the sofa. Nick sat in the chair across from her, hoping to find a comfortable spot, but at the moment there was none.
I spoke to Brett after you left, and he said something that was pretty interesting.
What'd he say?
He claimed that if I wasn't more cooperative in working with him, that he would seize control of the businesses here in Callahan. Does he have the authority to do that?
Ordinarily, you have more authority than he does because this is your county. But since this is a federal case dealing with counterfeiting, he has the authority.
What exactly am I looking at here?
He could get a temporary seize order that would allow him rights to intercept on the government's behalf.
Has he ever done that before?
No, it was always something the department used as a last resort. Ordinarily, he would put out an APB on the suspect. Then the suspect is brought in for questioning, or we would set up a sting operation and arrest the suspect in the process.
So, Brett has other options. He's just choosing to make this personal.
Nick said, putting it all together. Why would he do that?
He thinks you've been here long enough. He's ready for you to go back to D.C.
Are you suggesting there's something going on between Brett and me? Because if you are, you're not only wrong, but completely out of line.
Ordinarily, I would say you're right, but I'm looking at losing control of my town. So forgive me for looking at all the possibilities of why that is.
Nick, I understand perfectly well what's at stake here, but whether or not I had a personal relationship with Brett has no bearing on this case.
Did you? Or do you still? Is that why you're fixing the man's plate and tooling around town with him at night? I mean, it doesn't take a genius to see that he thinks there's something going on between us and he doesn't like it, so he's retaliating.
Just a minute. Who said I was tooling around town with Brett? It was then that Nick realized he had let that part slip. It was never his intention to say anything to her about what he saw. Were you spying on me? Her eyes became like tiny slits of anger as her lips curled with indignation.
I wasn't spying on you.
Yes, you were.
I came by to see you. While I was there, I saw the two of you pull up into the parking lot.
So you just assume that he and I are dating. For your information, I met with Brett to discuss the case, and I managed to lock my keys in the car. Brett took me to my motel so I could get my spare set. I went back, got my car, and came here. I thought you could use the information I was able to find out.
I shouldn't have been there.
Nick said with a heavy sigh.
I was out of line then, I'm out of line now. I'm sorry.
I know I said I just dropped by, but the truth is I wanted to give you this. I thought it would help. Michelin said, taking a folded piece of paper from her purse and tossing it at him. The paper landed on the floor as she headed for the door.
Michelin, wait.
Nick said, stepping over the paper. He rushed over to her and placed his hand gently over hers, stopping her from opening the door. Judging by her reddened cheeks and deep breathing, she was on the verge of slapping him, if he continued to stand in her way. Nick found something adorable about that. He chuckled, then he stepped aside. You think this is funny? Well, you know what? She asked, marching over to the paper on the floor. She picked it up and stuffed it back into her purse. I've decided that you don't deserve it. I'm going home, she said, leaving as the door slammed shut behind her. Out to the car Michelin went, with Nick following close behind her. Placing his hand upon her shoulder, he turned her around. Even in the dark, he could feel the heat of her glare upon him. What do you want? She fumed. Nick was about to answer when a car pulled up into the driveway. Bright headlights lit up the front yard. Time had got away from him, and now Chase was home. The ear-splitting rock music from the inside of the car said as much. Chase shut the motor off, silencing the music. It was quiet. The only thing that could be heard was Nick and Michelin's breathing. Nick was relieved that Chase arrived when he did. It kept him from making more of a fool of himself than he had done already. Nick stepped aside from Michelin, putting a respectable distance between them for Chase's sake. Taking his attention off of Michelin for a moment, Nick spoke to Chase, followed by a faint hello from Michelin as Chase crossed the yard.
Hello, Dad. Miss Stone,
he said with a smirk before he disappeared into the house. It's late. I should go, Michelin said, still standing there. Was it just him, or did she feel it too? The muscle in his stomach constricted as he drew in a deep breath.
There has to be an easier way around this.
Around what? Michelin snapped.
This.
He whispered, drawing close and kissing her lips slowly as he eased his hand around her waist and pulled her closer to himself. Feeling the warmth of her in his arms, Nick parted his lips, indulging himself in the softness of her kiss. That is, until the thought of Chase spotting the two of them from inside crossed his mind. If that were to happen, Nick knew that Chase would never let him hear the end of it. Nick moved his hand up around the delicate slope of Michelin's neck as his fingers gently swept over her earlobe. He kissed her once more before pulling away. He knew the timing wasn't right. As much as it hurt to let her go, Nick knew it was for the best.
We need to talk.
I don't think that's a good idea. What she said was barely audible, but he heard every word. Michelin got into the car and drove away, leaving him standing alone with his frustration. All things considered, Nick told himself, at least Chase wasn't glued to the window watching him from a ringside seat. Not feeling up to dealing with his son's questions, Nick decided to call it a night. To make sure that the topic was avoided altogether, he didn't bother to ask Chase about his night. The boy was home. For now, that's all that mattered.